Hello and welcome to Free Your Soma, Stories of Somatic Awakening and How to Live from the Inside Out. Today I have Jill Barrile with me, the owner of BarebyBarrile, a luxury boudoir photography studio and an intimacy coaching business. She's trained in a somatic, pleasure-based approach to relationship dynamics. And today we're going to explore Jill's own journey to developing a connection to her body and sexuality, and the three pillars of vulnerability, intimacy, and pleasure when it comes to the relationship we have with ourselves and with others. So welcome, Jill. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world, to the experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy, and here is where you free your soma. I'm your host, Amy Takaya. I'm here to help you move from pain to power, from tension to expansion, and ultimately from fear to love.
Me too. Thank you so much. Oh, it's so cool to hear it like spewed out like that. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Yeah, well, because you've been in business with the photography for a while, you've been doing boudoir photography, and then there's this newer element that you're bringing in, that you've been trained very, deeply in over the last year. And so you're kind of adding this new dimension to it. So I guess there's like a rebranding going on, there's a restructuring, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah, we're in the middle of like a rebrand, kind of moving into, I keep saying like our business is maturing. And so we're kind of moving into this, yeah, this new space. And it's because of the intimacy coaching that we're bringing in, deepening our photography practice even more. So we're very excited, very excited to get it launched and out there for the people and myself included.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about when did you start your business and
Yeah.
how did you get involved in boudoir photography? Like give us a little bit of your backstory here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started doing photography in, gosh, okay, so I started when I was 20. I'm trying to remember the year exactly when that was. I'm 34 now, so imagine 14 years ago. And so I started in college, and I really fell in love with the art form. I studied art therapy, so it was sort of like a balance to that. So I have a little bit of a therapy background as well. So I kind of use that a little bit of approach in my work, like more subconsciously, I think, than anything. But yeah, I started kind of doing stuff then, photojournalism and fine art. And when I graduated, I went into, I dabbled in different jobs and whatnot. Started working for a photo studio that did mostly weddings. That's kind of where my roots a little bit started as well. Like we're learning kind of like the business aspect of the photography. Because I'm like, I knew I love it, but I don't really know what to do with all this. So it's sort of the long journey of like taking different jobs on and just yeah, like kind of learning different like genres, I guess. 2015 I actually moved away for a while. I lived in Peru, and had this whole experience down there, and it was sort of in that time where I decided like I want to go full time into photography. I traveled, I was ready to start my business. I had done everything else possible, and for myself anyways, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to like take on this like entrepreneurial journey when I like returned back to the States. And that was in around 2016. And I started really doing everything, like said yes to everything and anything that came my way. And as I was progressing through it, I had done a little bit of boudoir in these old studios I'd worked for. And it was like always something I'm like, oh, I can't wait to like really do that. Like I just didn't know how, or like, I didn't have the roadmap necessarily for it. But anytime I had a chance to do a boudoir shoot, I just noticed how lit up the clients were after in a way I never experienced with any other type of photo shoot before, where they're leaving feeling like lighter and more connected to themselves. And I noticed that early on, but not really like fully understanding the scope of like what they were experiencing. And so in 2020, I with everything shutting down in the world, events, the weddings, all those other, like bigger events that I was like photographing, that slowing down like allowed me to bring my boudoir business more online. I moved to a bigger studio in that time space and really started to notice like what the clients were coming there for. It was so much beyond just wanting to have sexy photos or like that type of experience. It was so much more about the internal and like connecting to themselves and like using really for using the sessions as like milestones of chapters, like closing a chapter, celebrating something, like knowing that they were wanting to give themselves this kind of love and using creativity to sort of use that, which was really beautiful. And it was not something I was super connected to when I first started. I was just like, I really love this and drawn to it, but didn't know really the scope of what this was doing for my clients. And so as I was telling you earlier, the intimacy coaching aspect came online through a lot of different stuff, but mostly because clients were coming to me saying that they weren't ready yet to do this, but they had like a deep desire. They were drawn to it. And I'm like, you got to listen to that. First off, you're showing up to have a conversation about something and you do feel scared, and that's like normal. But the ones that wouldn't like go through with it, it was like, okay, when you're ready, come back and see me. And it was through that, knowing that I feel like I can help in this space. There's something here where I've walked myself through that feeling of feeling like this isn't like being scared and like totally like shut down to something, and being able to go to the thing that I actually
Right. Move
want
through
to
those
do.
blockages, move through the
Exactly.
blocks. And
Yeah.
yeah, so you kind of sensed, and it's interesting because I think, as an entrepreneur, there's so much personal growth that's required to keep showing up for your business and keep going out there and self-promoting. There's a lot of, that's why, with entrepreneurship and self-development, it pretty much goes hand in hand, because in
Yeah.
order to keep going, like you really have to dig deep into what's holding you back, to become a successful entrepreneur. And in this case, it's like, you started noticing that your clients were having these blockages, and it maybe even reminded you, just like you said, of pieces of yourself, places in yourself that felt this block. I mean, there was one right there, which was like, I feel like I might be able to help this person move through this really sensitive space that they're experiencing and help them be ready for something that they really want in their life. And yet I have maybe this little bit of a block inside myself where I don't feel like I'm qualified or I'm ready, or who am I to help this person move through that block. But you felt like that inclination. And so tell us a little bit about like what brought you to the point where you said, okay, like I'm going to go ahead and go for it. I'm going to do this intimacy coaching program and develop myself to be that person I can already just like imagine myself to be, see that I'm capable of that.
Yes. Oh, I got goosebumps you saying that, because I can go back to the moment that I signed up for this course. And there's, so much like led up to this moment itself. But I'll speak on this first because it was such a tell of how strong where I've come to really listen to the tells of my own soul, my own body, because I get like such set yeses and nos in my body now that I've like cleared out a lot of stuff and like I'm very in tune with my own system essentially. And so it was probably I started my training in October of this past year of 2023. And just so maybe a few weeks leading up to that, I was like having this itch. I'm like, there's something I'm supposed to be doing, or like just this like inclination of like, what is this next thing? Like, I feel like there's a missing piece of my business that I can't see yet. And I'm like, I just don't know what it is. It was like a feeling. And so I kept getting approaches and like different things coming into my field of like, oh, there's this like, program you could try or this or that. And it just was like, okay, like there's a lot of things coming in my field. I'm trying to digest them. Is like, what's the direction to go in? So I honestly just took a night that I lit a candle and I wrote out all these offers that were like coming to me. And I just put them on a sheet, like different sheets of paper on my table. And I was really like sort of just moving through this, like, I don't even know if it was like a meditative state or just like kind of writing down whatever's kind of coming to me. And one was, I want to be a sex and intimacy coach or educator. And that was the one, after I wrote it, I was like, that's what I'm supposed, like, that's what I want to do. Like that felt the most sure. And I'm like, I actually wrote out the thing that I want to be. And so I was like, okay, well, that's it. How I'm gonna do this, I'm not really entirely sure. And it really was like, I think I just got on down a rabbit hole of like research, like maybe a week after that, after I wrote that, kind of like, you write it and then it just, okay, we'll see what happens type of thing. And I went down this just sort of like journey and this like researching, and I happened upon this website. And it's called the Somatica method, is the training program I went through. And so I was looking into their stuff. I felt like really like drawn to them, because they are like a pleasure-based approach. Like they want to take you through this, but in a way that doesn't feel like you're just sitting in all of your pain, but really like moving through it through a place of pleasure and joy and like excitement and bliss. And that's like where I was coming from. Like I want people to move through stuff with that type of intention, I guess. And so I noticed, I was like, okay, well, the training starts tomorrow. And I'm like, do I do this? And so I sent them an email of like, I don't know, like when your next one is, da, da, da. And the lady called me like right away and was like, well, it starts tomorrow. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, I think I do. Because the other one didn't start till April. And I was like, I think this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. It was scary. It was a big investment. But there was so much yes behind it, where I got off the phone with her. I'm like, okay, give me a few hours to figure this out. Um, and I emailed her back that night. And I'm like, no, I want to do it. I'm all in. And so it was like really just a very quick sort of thing, but like such a sure feeling of like, this is the next thing for me. And so, just a testament to somatics in general, like just knowing like in your body, like when a yes is a big yes, has really changed my life, to be honest. And now being able to like help people listen to that part of them is pretty awesome.
Did you know that your muscles are holding on to thoughts, memories, and feelings? If you have a tight neck or back, you're not just getting old, you're experiencing a buildup of tension from the life you've lived. Most people don't know this, but there is a part of your brain that can reverse and prevent chronic tension. When you relax your muscles, you not only move better and regulate your nervous system, but you also free yourself from the grip the past has over your body. So you can live with freedom, confidence, and enjoy your life now. How does that sound? Join me, Amy Takaya, and discover what my clients are raving about at youcanfreeyoursoma.com. Yeah. Well, and sexuality is such a sensitive place for so many people because it's where many people carry some of their first kinds of wounds, about their identity or about like how they operate in the world. Like there's a lot that people are, I guess, vulnerable to when they go into that space in themselves where they're actually allowing themselves to feel, pleasure and things like this. Can you say a little bit about like your experience kind of with your own sexuality? You mentioned kind of feeling that you had times in your life where you felt like there was a block in the way, right?
Sure. Yeah. So I could probably spiral it back. I haven't actually gone fully back into my personal childhood first experiences, per se, but there's always been like an interest of like sexuality throughout my entire life. Like that's definitely been like a string or whatever you want to, a path of mine that has been curious about. But I would say what kind of led me to this in a deeper way, and I would say even if I even trailed back, like I was obsessed, like at the time, like when I was little, like with I don't know if you remember Dr. Ruth. I think she was
Yeah.
like watching her. Like I remember like staying up late to watch that. So there was always this sort of like, oh, I want to be like this little old lady one day. So there's always this interest. But really like what kind of had me like walk through it on my own was probably, when was it? So in 2020, I also got pregnant with my son. It was very unexpected. And walking through that whole experience of something that's so pleasurable, and like the experience of going through pregnancy in a sort of unknown world, because it was 2020, and also like in a way with someone that I wasn't really being met by. My system started shutting down, like in that capacity of like my sexuality, my like humanness, my personality, like a lot of me disappeared in that time period. And so what felt like it disappeared, I was very like just really disconnected at the time. And entering and kind of having this experience of becoming a mother and also splitting with his dad at the same time, I remember leaving that relationship feeling like a complete shell of myself. I was like, there's an outside of me, but like everything inside of me is just like barren. It doesn't, nothing is aligned. And I remember using that language. So like, this is like how using that language to describe where I was, of like, I just feel like my body is like completely twisted. Like I feel like part of me is over here, part of me is over here. And all I want to do is get into alignment. And I just don't even know what that looks like, what that feels like, but really feeling like all this garbage, or I don't even know how to explain it necessarily it's a really felt feeling that I felt at the time. But getting out of this relationship and realizing how far I let myself get away from me was like the mirror I needed. And I started working. I didn't really realize this until I started working with my own personal coach, who came into my life because of a kind of a weird coincidence through social media, essentially, of like her saying she wanted to work with me and being like, I need to work with you actually too. And so when I came together with her, she really helped me see myself and work through clearing out my system and realizing these patterns that were happening inside my body, and like educating myself on like what actually was going on, the trauma responses I was having to just other people, like in totally different experiences outside of that relationship, and being like, I can't live like this the rest of my life. And so really taking the time to clear that out helped me so much. And I would say it was in the beginning of last year, 2023, we had finished our work together mostly, where I felt good, but I also like everything felt good except for my sexuality. Like I still wasn't connected to that piece of me. I was still like blocked off. I wasn't really interested in relationship, even though I wanted it. It was sort of like that same feeling my clients get of like, I really want a relationship, but I'm like, there's still so much that I haven't been able to let go of there, between patterns and just being scared. Honestly, it was like I was just really scared. And so I decided to make another big investment with her and say, like, I want this time dedicated to my sexuality. And she does Tantra and like lots of different approaches to sexuality as well, ceremonially and things like that. And I swear, like, once I like kind of decided that that was what my focus was going to be, everything started to open up again. I was like guided through her to be like, it's okay and it's safe to take this part of myself back and allow myself to explore again. Because I guess I didn't have that space to explore in that relationship. And so that's what kind of brought me to this place of like, wow, I went from being completely closed off from relationship, from sexuality. Like I mean, most people don't know this, but I was like celibate for like a year and a half because I was like, I just don't want anyone like in my space, because I just
Mm.
can't bring them in. And so when it was time to finally like open that part of me back up, it was like, okay, I need the support along the way. And it was like it was a miracle. It felt like such a miracle to me, because I didn't know, I felt like I lost that part of me. And actually, after about 4 months working with her, I ended up meeting someone, my current partner, and like so much opened up for me in that relationship. And even through us getting to know each other, so much of the work I had done showed up there, where I got to like, I wasn't always doing stuff for him. I was like, I'm having these conversations with him for me. And
Yeah.
it really changed my approach to relationship of like, show up into your relationship for yourself in a sense as well, of like, I'm going to bring my vulnerability in a sensible way necessarily, to this relationship, because the more I can like share, the more he can understand me, and the closer our intimacy can be. And so it's been a journey, especially this past year, of going from like completely closed off to being this like relationship that's like allowed me to bloom to now like coaching in that. So it's been really full circle now that I'm saying everything out loud.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you know, quite a big shift in a pretty short amount of time, from, having your child and feeling like this sense of everything kind of being taken away or being like suppressed and
Mhm.
not feeling like yourself anymore. And then also realizing that like you couldn't continue on that way. And I think that anybody who goes into the coaching field is doing that because they had some kind of transformational experience with a coach or with a
Yeah.
mentor of some kind. Because that kind of relationship where someone is guiding you in these really intimate ways, like you're describing, is really powerful and really. In so many ways, it's kind of not only like reparenting, with someone they're kind of stepping in as like you know, your guide who is being the model for you, like the role model that maybe you didn't have around certain kinds of relational experiences or sexuality, right? But then they're also standing in as like a friend and like a confidant and like, something much more than that. And so I think that, this relationship that you had with your coach has served as a model for kind of even how you want to operate moving forward, that level of depth that you want to be able to offer people. And I think that the way that you're doing it, combining it with photography, is really fascinating because it's a very intimate thing to take a picture of somebody representing them, representing a part of them, maybe, even if perhaps they're costumed and they're performing a little bit and they're expressing themselves creatively. You're still capturing like an essence of like part of them, right? And so I can see how these two things actually blend together really beautifully in the setting that you're providing, right? And I love also that, it sounds like you have had the experience of success in moving through blockages that felt really immense, that felt really unmovable, and that you had that experience of success moving through that, because then you carry that hope for people. You carry that confidence that even though this feels really difficult at this moment, there is a possibility that you can be on the other side of this. Like I used to say, like when I first started working with clients at the level that I'm working with them now, when I would sit there listening to what someone was going on with someone who's in chronic pain, someone who's feeling really stuck, someone who's feeling bogged down by all of their mental and emotional pressure that they're experiencing, I was like, this is like time traveling. I feel like I'm talking to myself from 7 years ago.
Right. Well, that's it. Isn't that so beautiful? Like I love that too, because like I think as like coaches or leaders in this, it's like we're not really that far ahead of you, if not even ahead of you, but we're just kind of like going a little bit first. But we're kind of walking through this together at the same time. Like we're leading each other in a sense, because yeah, we've been there. We've walked through it, and it is a I would say, like, I mean, I also went to therapy at the time, but the therapy helped me like rehash some stuff, but like the coaching really helped me move my life forward. Like it really helped me take the last, 3 years, and what I felt like would have probably taken me 10 years. I feel like I did in like a year and a half, 3 years at this point, where I feel like I'm in it like above, not above it, but like fully out of it in a completely different life. And so I think there's something really magical too about like coaching and like having someone like help lead you through this that has like been through it before, because you don't really get that always in like other avenues of you're trying to work through your blockages. Like I think maybe on a side level they'll like tell you the things that you should get done, but like really to walk through something hard, to really move blocks, it takes a little bit of that. I think it does help take like working with somebody that has been through it, I guess.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that is actually, I mean, I didn't know this recently, but like there are lots of therapists out there who have not been through therapy themselves, or have done the
Wow.
minimal amount if their program even required it. So I assumed, for whatever reason, I assumed that if you're
Yeah.
a therapist with like a master's in psychology, that it would have been some kind of prerequisite or requirement to go through these, to have a therapist and go through therapy yourself. Apparently, it is not a requirement. And
That's surprising.
it's
That's really
bizarre, right? And I talked to a
surprising.
few different psychotherapists recently who said that there are people who go through, the schooling for all of that, who never go through therapy as the patient, the patient or the client, and who also, if they do, if they are part of some kind of specialized program, they do like the cheapest, most minimal amount that they have to. Like kind of as like if you were just, going through the motions to get your papers, you know what I mean, for school, you might not go to the most expensive, college if you feel like you could just get like, the bare minimum covered, with the amount of money that you have allotted for this or whatever. So that was really shocking to me when I learned that. And that's a difference between, I think that, ideally, and maybe I don't know enough about the coaching world to say this, but like ideally, someone who is a coach has been coached
Oh yeah.
significantly a lot, so they've
And
been on the receiving end. That's maybe one of the differences between, talk therapy and coaching.
yeah, and I'm sure like not all the coaches have coaches, but like it's always like that's the kind of the thing is like, well, every coach has a coach, like how a therapist or a therapist should have a therapist. Maybe it's I assumed as well. But I guess at the same time, like I personally feel like I need to do everything my clients have done. So like I I did a boudoir shoot. I've done a few at this point where I'm like, I just want to feel the same experience of like walking into a place where I don't know anybody and having this experience with a stranger because I want to feel what that feels like. It helps me become a better business owner and photographer and just like be able to relate to what they're feeling. But that's like a personal, for me, I always have, I have to do it in order to feel what it feels like. And then I can like bring it to people or whatever. I think that's like how I learn as well. So, but also I think, yeah, you should, if you're doing it, like walking the walk, like gotta get yourself in the muck a little bit to feel what it
Right.
feels like. Sure.
Yeah.
The one thing I even when it comes to like the therapy stuff too is that sexuality is not really like taught in normal, like if you can like specialize, I think a little bit more in like sexuality and like gender and things like that, but they don't really teach a lot of people about how to, like for instance, like find out like maybe they have an STD or how like there's like a pain in the body and like how to work through that. Like they don't really teach a lot, or like having trauma, like sexual trauma. There's not a lot of work even in my course. There's like over like 100 people that we were, doing this training I'm doing, and some are family therapists, and a lot of them are like, yeah, there's no training in family therapy around like sexuality, which is it blows my mind because I mean it does it in a sense because I know where we are like as a culture, but it also is like one of the most basic things that we do as human beings. Like we should learn how to like use it as a way to like bond and as tool, and it's like such a, it feels like so taboo in so many worlds where it's kind of one of the things like it shouldn't be so taboo. It should be like kind of a basic knowledge, or it should be basic like part of a curriculum that it's not a part of. So that's like another thing I'm very, passionate about is like sexual health and like education around that aspect of it too. Just like there's so much shame. We do a lot of work in shame as well in this practice of like de-shamifying the things that we are holding on to, especially around our like sexuality and our sexual health. So,
Yeah, well, and it's intertwined with how, we feel about our bodies or how we've been taught to externalize our bodies and, rather than live in them, like see our bodies as like a project or as like something that needs to be improved or that isn't good enough until such and such a point, until I lose 10 pounds or until I look this way or that way, that we are not allowed to enjoy being in our body until that something happens, until I, get more musculature or whatever it is. Like men and women have different hangups about that, where we
right.
will, deny ourselves, the joy of sensation and pleasure in our bodies until we get to some, perceived point that, we've determined that is usually from the outside. It's some kind of, you know, rule that we're putting on ourselves from the outside, rather than what would I do, if I just wanted to like feel good in my body. And now a lot of people, they still do those things to feel good in their body, but then they feel really bad about them and they
Yeah.
hide them and they shame themselves about them, which in turn like strengthens that desire to do these things, that then they don't feel good about. It turns into this cycle, this shame cycle, right?
Yeah, vicious
Versus like
cycle.
really just owning like how you feel, and that maybe it is okay to enjoy what you enjoy, obviously like with caveats here about like hurting other people and harming
Right.
people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like the being able to enjoy your own body and receive and feel pleasure in your own body and not feel like there's something wrong with that, or that there's something, I mean, I struggled with a lot of this, and throughout my early life I felt like it tied in a lot with like my own beliefs about whether I was worthy of love in general. Worthy of pleasure is worthy of love. Am I worthy of feeling good? you know and I grew up with this feeling like there was something innately wrong with me, that there was just something broken or something wrong with me that couldn't be, resolved or fixed, or, and so I was constantly seeking, not only proof that that was true, proof that there was something wrong with me, but I was also
Yeah.
seeking for someone else to come in and tell me that I was okay. And it's through the somatic work, honestly, it's through the rebuilding and reconnecting to feel all of my body and feel safe to be in all of my body, that feeling of there being something innately wrong with me no longer has that control or that pull on me, right? It's softened, and it leaves like space for other feelings to come in, other sensations. It leaves room for pleasure and joy and happiness to actually arise spontaneously in my body, right? When I'm not blocked with that something's wrong with me
Yeah.
feeling.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I remember like some of my earliest like sexual or sensual experiences, like feeling so much like I couldn't tell anybody about it. Like it was like a shameful thing, or like it was such a secret. Like I was definitely like a secret keeper. Like I was like, I can't tell anyone about like these type of things. And so I remember like ruminating on them for years, like being like, I did this thing, and it's like, and maybe if I had the education around it, or like this, there was like a more of a like I think more education like how like what this actually is, and like knowing like what the act of whatever it was doing plays out like in the body, and like it not being seen as like a bad thing. I think maybe I would have had a different approach, but feeling like really bad about myself for engaging in certain activities, or just like even thinking about it was like, okay, like I'm not gonna, I didn't talk about it like ever until I probably years after, um with friends, maybe in college or something like that. So it was, it definitely stems at it. Like I wish that at a young age of like, there's curiosity so young in us, and there's a lot of messaging of to not allow for that type of pleasure to come up. And what happens when we push things down for our whole lives is like it gets stuck, as we know, like it gets stuck in us, and it turns into shame and calluses, and then it takes years for us to like undo that, if we can even acknowledge like what that is, like
Mhm.
because that even is like its whole journey in itself of like, okay, what does it actually come back to? Is it my sexuality? Is it something else, so but I have a very strong pull of like, yeah, if you like had a better understanding of like how it all works, have we used intimacy more as a way of like understanding ourselves and being able to relate to each other on a level that is vulnerable, but also like in a strong way? Because I approach it as like when we can be vulnerable with somebody, there's like our connection with them can deepen, and like that's maybe what the intimacy piece is. That's when like that deepening of our connection with our relationship and with ourselves um happen. I go
Yeah.
off.
Well, no, and maybe you can give us a life, like a real life example of something maybe that
Yeah.
you moved through or that you saw people move through in your program. Like what might someone come to you with that is requiring these pillars of vulnerability, intimacy, and pleasure for them to move through this thing that feels unmovable? Give us like an example.
Yeah, let me think of something that so it's kind of cool. Like in the program, so this first half of the training, we did everything. So like again, when you were saying like putting yourself where the people are, we had to do the whole training was like us going through all of the exercises as a practitioner, as a student, and like all this stuff would come up for you. And so we had to really move through the whole training as if we were like a client. And so that was really good in being like, okay, how did this like feel for me as I was moving through it? I'm gonna try to think back if there was like a specific place where I'm trying to think of like maybe a specific weekend because it was every weekend, once a week, one weekend a month for 6 months. I'm trying to remember exactly if there was like a specific moment or a specific thing I was kind of working through. I know I would call my partner pretty much right after all of our things, and I'd be like, I have to open up to you about this. So I know there was like this like thing happening for me of like, wow, like I'm sharing so vulnerably with these people, and it made me want to go to my partner and like bring something up with him anymore. Like instead of maybe turning into a fight or turning it into be like, you're not doing this for me, I want to like bring this to you in a way of like I'm being vulnerable and I'm feeling maybe like insecure about something. I'm working through this and I just want you to know. And
Mm.
that really like I think helped our relationship because we weren't living together. We'd only see each other a couple times a week, maybe. And being able to like have the verbal like verbiage to say like, I'm not doing okay. It has nothing to do with you. But I want you to know like I'm moving through something right now. This actually happened. That kind of brings me up something personal. Just a couple weeks ago, and I attest this to being able to work through this because of this methodology. As I was having sort of like I've never felt this kind of low in a while, and I was just having like a very low couple days where like I felt what I end up coming to terms with like very undervalued and disrespected, mostly in my business. And so I was like, I felt like I kept hitting these blocks in my business, just having like this not amazing interactions with clients or just feeling like this turbulence within myself. I don't know that it was showing necessarily on the outside, but I was feeling like this just deep sense of like being undervalued for the work that I'm doing, essentially. It was what it kind of came down to. And I realized in that time of like how that was happening. I was also me and my partner, we just moved in. We have 3 kids between the two of us. And there was just a lot of like turbulence with the kids like learning, they're toddlers, so they're like, working out lack of like, I don't even say control, but there was just a lot of kind of chaos in that space as well, where like my son was acting out a little bit and like learning how to like, instead of just like numb out, which was like my old approach of like, I just gotta go do something else. I'm gonna go numb out and go edit my pictures or whatever. Like that's something I would go do as like a coping mechanism, which sometimes helps and other times would be like, okay, you're not dealing with what you're actually feeling right now type of thing. Um, and so like that was happening. And so it felt like there's these two of the most important things in my life, both like really rocking my world. And it just started to manifest. Like I felt this deep pain or like heaviness in my chest. And I just like could not get rid of it. And it was just sitting there for about 2 days and kept growing. And then my partner came to me and he was like talking to me about something that he needed to bring up with me. And so it was just like the last thing of like, oh, like, okay, there's like another thing that I feel like I'm not, I don't have like a perfectionism thing, but I'm like, I'm really not doing good at this thing too. And he wasn't saying that, but like I was trying not to take it that way. And what I had probably done in previous relationships is what I was like, okay, I need to fix this. Like, I need to fix the problem. I need to apologize. I need to, like, do this like big, like, well, you did this and that's why I did this. And sort of like that conversation, I'm sure a lot of us get into as like when we're in a relationship, we're like, well, I'm going to blame, I did this because of that and make an excuse for like why I did this certain things. our little thing tiff was over just I can't exactly even remember, of course, because that's usually how it goes. And just us having that conversation the next day, instead of being like, hey, can we sit down and talk, because I was feeling so bad, I was like, we're gonna go, we'll come back in a few hours, and that's it. Like, I need some space, essentially. And I'm like, I've never, like, that was a growing moment for me. So I'm like, I never would be like, oh, I need space. I would be like, let's hash it out. Let's like buckle through it. Let's have this long conversation in this really emotional state. And I came back and I still was feeling a little off, but I like laid in the bed and he comes in and he's like, are you mad at me? And I'm like, I'm not. It has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with what I'm working through right now and just me feeling bad. And I kind of just need to sit in my feeling bad state. And he sat with me and he was like, okay, like, and that was like a big moment, I feel like, in our relationship, of being like, I'm feeling bad. I don't want to bring you down to this, but I want you to know, like, I'm going to be sitting in this for like maybe a little bit. And I think even him just coming and like laying with me and being receptive, I shifted out of it. I shifted out, like being able to be vulnerable and tell him, like, no, it's nothing you did. Like, even though I could have blamed something on what something he did or something else outside of myself, it was really just my own thing I had to work through. And so staying vulnerable with him, I realized like I'm letting my boundaries be crossed in other areas of my life. I'm lowering my standard to meet other people's needs. And once I like kind of sat with that and realized those things, I'm like, this is what it is. I'm feeling undervalued. I'm feeling taken advantage of. I'm not holding my boundaries in parts of my life. And after realizing that, I was able to kind of move through it and make those changes. And so, like, to me, that's like the approach. It's like something kind of cut me down. I sat in it for a while and I was able to actually see what was happening, like, rather than being blaming this, like, oh, the kids threw something or were really loud or like being disrespectful. It really came down to like how I was feeling about the situation, everything that was outside of myself. And so that was a big moment, like in relationship, of using the work instead of creating a fight, really using it as like a moment of like, okay, I gotta shift some stuff. I gotta move some things. And
Right.
uh,
Well, it takes a lot actually, like, what you described of like kind of usually being the person who would push through and be, going for this like hyper emotional conversation to maybe even like get some of that catharsis to like get it off your chest or like get that energy out. And instead
mhm,
to just choose instead to like gently contain it and be with it and
mhm,
take the space to like allow that energy to keep moving without it having to be like explosive or dumped on the other person. That is a huge, step in the direction of, I guess we could call like emotional maturity,
yeah,
because I can relate to
1,000%.
your story. I can relate to that, being that person who'd just be like, okay, I guess we're just going to have to go through this while I'm in this really like overwhelmed state. And there's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with doing that. It's not like we're saying like that's a wrong thing to do. It's
Right.
just, it's not the only way to do something and to feel
Yeah.
like, oh, I could do that. Or I could also just take some space. I could do that, or I could like just take the moment to lay here in the bed and like feel my feelings and let them be. Like this word, this phrase has been coming in really strong for me. Like, can we just let this exist without
Mm,
having to fix it or aggressively process it or transmute it instantly into a positive
yeah.
thing, right? Like, can we just sit with it and allow this feeling to exist? Because a lot of times, like, that's what our body wants, is for us to feel what's coming up because there's information there. You got that information
Yeah.
that that you were feeling disrespected or you weren't feeling valued, but then you could also see how you were playing a part in that too. You were lowering your standard, you were maybe not communicating and letting people know like where you really stand on things and stepping forward as your own self advocate, and then that was creating this feeling in you. And so your body's trying to get your attention through thoughts and feelings and emotions. We live in this world where we think our thoughts and our emotions are somehow separate from our body. But I've learned through lots of experience that my
Yeah.
thoughts are my body. It's another form of my body talking to me when I'm having thoughts. Strong emotional states are my body trying to get my attention about something that my conscious mind is not aware of, not
Right.
totally grasping. And so there's all this alarm bells and noise going off to try to communicate something to me. And it's only through kind of what you just described doing and slowing down and quieting things in
Yeah.
various ways, getting that space, taking that moment, letting someone actually know I'm going through something here, you
Mhm.
know, let me have this, like, can you let me exist in this experience? Which is essentially what you asked of him. Can you
Yep.
let me
Yeah.
exist here in this feeling? And
Yeah.
in that way, saying that allows you to exist for yourself in that space. Like it deepens that to communicate that, that
Mm.
these uncomfortable sensations and intrusive thoughts or whatever it is allowed to exist right now in me.
And all of that, yes, like exactly. And like I think there was even some shame around being like, I need to hold it together. I need to have like this, like I don't want to like perfect image that he has of me to be, like um I keep seeing
Painted.
like ink. Yeah, painted like in a like I don't want to, yeah, like painted or I don't know, just like turned into like something that I'm not or whatever. I don't know what exactly like I see so many more visuals these days where I'm like I just see it as like yeah like an ink put onto me or like a black spot or something like that I'm like I don't want him to see that, but like through that our relationship could get closer like by able to like open those things up. And like I don't suggest anyone to be like okay let me tell you about everything right in the you know maybe in that moment, but or like like it's over time intimacy builds, vulnerabilities build, and you don't even know what's going to come up that is going to deepen a connection with somebody. But I think having tools maybe such as this like where it's like something's coming up, acknowledging there's feelings happening, and then sitting in it for longer than maybe what feels comfortable, and then taking action, which action may be like doing nothing but like taking some sort of action. Those are like the three steps like I kind of follow with myself of like this has been tapping at me, let me sit in it, let me see what it's the information it's giving me, like just like you said, like because the bad feelings give us more information than all the good ones. Like I want to sit in my bliss all freaking day, let me tell you, but at the same time like when something comes up that feels uncomfortable, nerving, and like anxiety ridden, like those are the ones I want to sit with because that's where the growth is. That's like our edge, right? Like that's where the edge where we meet our edge of like personal growth.
Mhm.
And that's what fascinates me. It's like once you can like figure out what that is, we can sit there and allow that anxiety to come up, those nerves to come up, and actually listen to what it's telling us. Because it might not be that exact action of like what we think it is, like what our brain's telling us it is. It's really something else. And that's like you said, like dipping down into the body and be like, okay, it's not because that I'm having to do something that's uncomfortable, like give a speech or whatever. It really has to do with my like sense of self-worth, and I got to work on that maybe or something like that. So it's fascinating. And so
Yeah.
like in a coaching call, like someone might actually, we might bring up something that's super uncomfortable, and they in the coaching call going through these steps of like, well, I'm going to aggravate something or bring a feeling up for you through maybe an exercise, and we're going to sit in that together in this safe space where you have the time and the ability to sit in it with somebody. And then maybe there is an action that comes afterwards. And so, like, that's what kind of makes this a little different is like, we go through it of like bringing those things up so you can move through them. So, when you're in your real life, you can actually practice this stuff and like already kind of start to get to know those feelings and knowing how to manage them and what your body's actually telling us because all of our bodies do different things. So as we
Right. And
know.
then how would you say that the pleasure element comes in? I mean, here it is. We've kind of sat through these feelings. Maybe there's been some kind of action that arises
Yeah.
to address what the feeling was trying to
Yeah.
communicate to us. And then, kind of when I think of like a completion or like a full circle with this, it's like coming back to being able to receive and feel good,
Mhm.
after this cycle of kind of dipping into the darkness, the sun comes up again. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So like the pleasure piece could be even not everyone has a place to explore their pleasure. And we could start as simple as like doing breath work with them, where they're like connecting to like their heart and their chest and like their hips. and really dipping into their body and feeling really like held in that space, to exploring like more of their sexuality. And I think that's kind of a having a container where we can like talk about sex and the pleasures that maybe we feel like are behind closed doors, is pleasurable, and exploring like the desires that we have that are feel like maybe weird or maybe just uncommon or something like that. Giving it space is also very pleasurable. So like something that we practice, someone's like wanting to deepen their like maybe their sexuality or spice things up, people say like that's like a big desire people want if they come to like a couples therapy, is, you know, maybe we have like mixed matched libidos, or we're just like been together forever. Like, how do we get back to that? Or like, how do we deepen? And so like, I think a lot of it's through vulnerability and being able to talk about our desires. So like one of the first things we would start with is, if we're feeling like ready for it, is talking about our core desires. Like, how do we want to feel when we show up to an intimate situation? How do I want to feel in any situation with you? Like, we have a date night kind of, how do we want to feel there, rather than like, oh, we're going to go and have the dinner and do the thing and have a drink, but like, what is the feeling that we want to create? You know, like I think about that kind of stuff all the time. And then bringing it to the bedroom of like, how do I want to feel when we're together, when we're intimate? Like, do I want to feel dominated? Do I want to feel like this sense of like being taken? Or is it more like, I just want to feel completely loved and sensual? And it doesn't need to be anything like quote unquote nasty or like, you know, like extra kinky or whatever. It could just be a feeling of, I just want to be fully like feeling so loved by you. And then we talk about what that could look like. And so I think that kind of brings in that more pleasure piece of being like, not just about the act itself, but really come back to the feeling that we want to have in our bodies when we're having these experiences with each other.
Yeah, I love that it, you know, the way you're describing it, it doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be really complicated and it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be kinky or extreme. Like certainly for some people it probably is, and those are things that
Yeah.
they're playing with and discovering and working out, you know. But then for other people it may just be as simple as like really needing that direct eye contact that says like, you're the only person in the room to me, or you have my complete and undivided attention, you know. And
Yeah.
how much of our lives, especially when we get into partnerships with kids and jobs, that we don't give each other our total and complete and undivided attention. And so we can feel like there's a deficit of that, you know, and to feel that sensation of someone looking at you, you know, and seeing you more than just seeing like what you do for them in your life, you know, the functions that we have
Yeah.
as, you know, parents or couples, you know what I mean? But seeing more into your essence and into your soul, you know, that's a real huge turn on, especially for, you know, women, but I think also for men. I think men want to be
Yeah.
held in that kind of regard as well, you know, being really cherished, you know, and really seen in this, you know, in our nobility, you know, in our fullness, you could say. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I don't think we always bring an approach of like, oh, how we want to feel. Like, I think that's kind of like there's the acts we perform or whatever, but like connecting to like that emotional state of like, it could just be so simple as like lighting a candle. Like, there's some stuff that we would go through, like, as you are exploring your core desires of like, what does it actually look like? What are your senses telling you? Is it going down from like, you know, we talk about like, you know, music and things like that, but like maybe it's something else that makes you feel, that kind of takes it to that next place for you. And I think through that you're able to connect with your partners or yourself, even like when you're self pleasuring and, you know, in your own state of being. Like, how do I want to even feel like on my day off I have a few hours to myself? Like, what is the feeling I want to feel right now, even if it's not like an essential sense? Like, I know like for me on my days off I'm like, ooh, I just like love to have me time and quiet time to connect with my own energy. So I'm less like, I want to light a candle. I want to even be on my like doing something crafty, or like I want to be out maybe in nature and just like knowing the feeling I want to create. And it might not be like the activity might be different, but the feeling I get is the same. And so I think that's sort of like an interesting way to like start to see like our sexuality is like the feelings. And there's a lot that people work out through in you know, like through like BDSM and kink and in their sexual life. We like do if we can be with partners that are safe, we can work through a lot of our own blocks, maybe traumas, because we're finding a safe place to act those out. And so that's another thing that like is explored in this. It's pretty vast. Like it's like there's so much gender, things like that that we do talk about. But I also find it fascinating to be able to like use your intimate experiences with someone to find safety in maybe a scenario where you weren't safe before. And so
Right.
that is another thing that people will um and maybe ask their partners for of like, I want this to occur, but I want to do it with you because then I can feel safe and I can almost like rewrite that history a little bit. So
Right.
it's fascinating.
Right. Explore a part of ourselves that at one point got, shunned or frozen or disconnected from because of, shame, whether it was, internalized shame or shame that came from another person, a parent or authority figure or something. And then being able to work that out and replay that. And like you said, rewrite that story a little bit inside our own nervous systems, and the big foundation piece here that I love that you're bringing up is just that, all of this comes from that foundation of safety. And how do we create that by actually recognizing how do I want to feel? What's the feeling that I want to create? And when we start to connect with that, what's really amazing is our brains already start to create the pathway to that feeling. And
Mm,
as we're creating that pathway to that feeling, whatever is in the way of feeling that completely is going to show up. The roadblock is
mm,
going to show up as we start paving the road, right? Then it leads us to those juicy places, like you said, those edges, those uncomfortable spots where we're actually ready to like transform that space, because what's on the other side is that safety and that love and that pleasure, that we're dreaming of, that we're longing for, and the road to get there is through connecting with how do I want to feel, what do I want to create, and you know create the circumstances around me for this spontaneous feeling to arise, but it's not purely spontaneous because it's manifested, in our imagination, in our creative force.
yeah, it's really fascinating where everyone goes. Cause like again, we were like with a group of 100 people. So like it was interesting to see where everybody's, like desires were, their pleasure, where there were like all of that kind of coming to the surface and taking like a really big scan of like what everyone's kind of going through. It was really interesting. And yeah, safety is such an important I actually said that to my partner the other day because we were talking about just, you know, I don't know, he said something that he liked about me. He's like, what, like, can you tell me something you like about me? Or I don't know. It was like some kind of weird banter we were having. And I told him this before, but it's like, I just feel so safe with him in a way where it's like, on like almost all levels. And like, that is such a value to me to feel completely safe to be yourself, to be able to show up, to be able to, and it wants me to be more vulnerable. I want to like continuously deepen in that relationship. But for me, safety, even in my, it was always like a pillar of my photography practice because I feel like that's a really important thing for my clients to come in, feel informed and ready to be there, but like knowing that you're gonna feel anxious, you're gonna feel nervous, maybe. You may feel not like you're not ready or whatever, but like knowing that this is a safe, sacred place for you to be and to explore and like like yeah, to move through those edges, maybe try on something different than you normally are. Like I want them to know like this is like creative freedom and it's a safe place to be creatively free. And so I think that's why like that's a really important part for me for that aspect of my business is like safety is so important for you to feel good in your body. And the coaching I think helps people get there that aren't able to get there on their own too.
Right,
So
right. Because safety is not just something that, I mean, obviously your environment and the people in it are important for, a sense of safety, but it's also a, internal sensation. And so, I mean, I've been in environments where I'm sure that I was technically safe, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel
yeah.
open. I didn't feel like it was okay for me to say what was going on with me. And it wasn't because of the people in the environment. It was because of that feeling I carried in, I brought in the room with me that day. So it's kind of this dance between like, okay, our environment and what's going on is real, and then also what we're carrying and bringing, and whatever you want to call it, your baggage that you're carrying around with you that gets in the way, right? And so that dance of really letting someone know, like, this isn't a space for you to start to unwind whatever that is that's preventing that feeling of safety and security to be felt within you, is a
Right.
huge part of, I mean, I think what you're doing is really cool. I'm really excited for, the work that you're bringing locally to Buffalo, right? Because that's where you're located, right? And so the people here in the city, but then also like where this is going to take you, if you decide to, like, you can travel with something like this, you know what I mean? You could be doing it at
Totally.
like a retreat or something like that. This is dynamic work that you have created for
Yeah.
yourself. So tell us a little bit about kind of what do you see for your vision for your business over the next,
Yeah.
3 to 5 years or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, like just speaking a little bit to like that safety piece, I have a lot of clients that come back, like, they have their first experience and then they want to come back because like I think they do have that feeling of safety and now they're really wanting to show up differently and do it a little bit more like pushing an envelope or the edge or just feeling what it feels like to do it without the feeling of totally unexpected and totally normal to feel like you've never gotten naked with a stranger before. Probably like in this capacity anyways. Maybe you have, but no judgment, of course. But like coming in and like having a different, like knowing like what to expect. So I do have like a membership program where I have like clients that are able to come for multiple shoots. So they can kind of feel their journey of like where they started and where they're going. And there's some coaching involved with that as well. And yeah, like as I'm relaunching our rebranding of the business over the next couple weeks, by the end of July, we should be in full operation under the BarebyBarrile brand, formerly Jillian Barrile Photography. So we're moving into this new space, and man, it's so hard for me to see like the grand scheme of things sometimes, but I feel like I have a roadmap of I want to bring this online more so that it can be available to not just people that are locally with me. So in the works, I have a Telegram community that's going to be launching hopefully by the end of July, where people from anywhere can come in and being a safe space to talk about the things I'm calling it whispers right now. I don't know if that name's gonna stick, but like the things that we whisper about behind closed doors and like what we want to like actually bring to the surface and like having a space where we don't have to censor ourselves in a sense of like sensing a sense and like respect for each other, but like not in a sense of like I want to, be able to speak a little bit more freely. And so that's a community that's going to be, I think, kind of part of what I see myself as more like online with me is going to look like. So that's the first step. And then we also have programs where you can go through 3 months of coaching with me. And at the end, which could be for anybody if they are wanting to travel, and with a creative photo shoot. So like taking them from a place of feeling I don't know exactly yet. Maybe it's like insecurity, maybe it's nerves, maybe it's just feeling really blocked in their sensuality and who they are and trying to step into that unaligned and walking through 3 months of coaching and working one-on-one and being able to like message with me throughout that time and then ending with a creative photo shoot to kind of like show what they like stepped into essentially
Mm.
giving them that sort of like gratification of that creative space to be like okay we moved through this and now you get to show up and you have to like you actually have photo evidence of yourself shifting and transforming and I think that's a powerful piece for a lot of people is they don't really some people are like don't really get boudoir and like why people like to do it but I think when it comes down to it it's like one of the forms of photography that you're able to really see like the transformation because it's just of one person and you're in there not always bare necessarily but like you're able to really look at these type of images over time and be like oh I went back to that place and I can see like what parts of me were uncomfortable still like where I loosened up maybe come if I come back in a year or two. And I have clients tell me a lot of like, I saw an image of myself this month, like during my viewing of these photos, initially, and months later coming back and be like, wow, I love how beautiful I was in this image that I hated when I first saw it. And I think that's like the beauty of this work is that like you're going to be in the transformation of your lifetime. Like your lifetime is transformation, right? But like being able to have these markers of like photography, I think really gives you like that gift of actually knowing that you move like what you've moved through. And so I'm really excited. I don't really know. We'll see what happens. But we host events a lot, and I'm hoping like to bring this to like a retreat space, down the road as life opens up a little bit more. So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
Awesome.
see.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
love that idea of the ceremony of the photography shoot at the end. It's also a celebration, a celebration of what we've moved through. Because I mean, 90 days, 3 months is, it's quite a space of time in someone's life, and it's a time of building a new perception and a new habit and all of that. So I think that's really exciting. And if anyone wants to reach out to you or learn more about your coaching business, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, no problem. So, my website, I'm not sure when this is coming out for the podcast, but it'll probably be in alignment with when this website launches. But it's Bare, by Barrile, .com. That's going to be my website. I'm BarebyBarrile on Instagram. If you're female identifying, we have a Facebook group as well. It's kind of right now it's like my free community to connect with us, and I post a lot of different things in there. It's not just boudoir stuff, but a lot of just like connecting to yourself. Some things are like just silly funny things, and yeah, it's a really good community of like women that are like past clients, as well as just people that are you feel safe kind of connecting in a more intimate, vulnerable way, and there's not always like a lot of places to do that. So yeah, those are probably the top three ways to connect with me. DM me anytime. I'm good
Nice.
for that. I'll usually get back within 24 hours. I do have a toddler that occupies a lot of my daytime space. But yeah, I usually can get back to people really relatively quick.
Wonderful.
So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
check her out. Check out her website. Check out her offerings if you're curious about learning more about this kind of work. And, if you're in the Buffalo area and you didn't know this existed and you somehow found this podcast, take a look into it. Maybe there'll be something that shows up as you inch your way towards this, shows up that's that beautiful edge for you of something, some block of some space inside of you that maybe is showing up because it's ready to be transformed. It's ready to be moved through. So.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. I love this. I'm honored to be able to speak on this type of work, and thank you. Just thank you
Oh,
so much.
absolutely, Jill. And we'll catch up soon in person and have a coffee or something.
Yeah, I can't
All right.
wait. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Hey there, friend. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts. Follow me on Instagram at Amy Takaya and send me a DM about this episode. I'd like to thank you for being part of this somatic revolution. And if you'd like to support the podcast and help more people learn about somatics, consider leaving a review or a rating. And finally, if you'd like to have the experience of relief in your tight hips or back and learn to understand what your body is really saying to you, visit youcanfreeyoursoma.com. I can't wait to share with you what is truly possible. Bye for now.